Let me talk to someone today who's confused. You're stuck between closure and calling. Everybody around you is saying, just let it go, just move on. But deep inside, you keep feeling, why do I still care? Why does this still pull on my spirit like this? I came to tell you something that will go against culture, go against comfort, but it will not go against God's voice. Everybody wants a clean break, a clean chapter. But God doesn't always work with a period. Sometimes He uses a comma. Just because the relationship is in pause mode doesn't mean it's over. God may not be closing the door. He might be teaching you to stay when it's uncomfortable. We pray for strength, then run at the first sign of struggle. But the real test of faith isn't just in leaving, it's in staying when God says stay. You're crying, yes. You're hurting, yes. But somehow there's still peace. That's not you being delusional. That's called divine clarity in the middle of emotional fog. Jesus didn't leave the storm. He spoke peace into it. And if God has spoken peace into this person's presence in your life, don't let other people's opinions override your peace from God. It's messy, but it's meaningful. It's slow, but it's solid. It's not perfect, but it's progressing. Listen, just because it's not where you want it to be doesn't mean it's not where God wants it right now. God doesn't microwave transformation. He cultivates it. It cultivates it. And if you both are still growing, even if it's awkward, even if it's frustrating, don't move out of the place God's still moving high. You've tried to ignore it. You've tried to move on. But when you think about purpose calling your growth, that person isn't a distraction, they're a mirror. They show you your blind spots. They challenge your complacency. They don't take you away from God, they point you to Him. That's not by accident. That's alignment. It's not just emotions. It's not just memory. Your spirit won't settle for done because something in you knows this isn't finished yet. I'm not talking about soul ties. I'm talking about spiritual timing. Sometimes your head says, walk away, but your spirit says, wait, God's not done. And you can't override the spirit with surface level logic. Ever try to block someone God keeps sending back? Not every re-entry is toxic. Summertime. When God orchestrates restoration, it won't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a text, a random conversation, a burden to pray for them. It's God saying, you thought this was over, but I'm not finished writing this story. We judge people by where they were, but God sees where they're going. Are they changing? Are they fighting for their faith? Don't confuse imperfection with unqualified. If you see the fruit of the Spirit beginning to grow, even in broken soil, that's not a sign to leave. That's a sign to lean into what God is growing. Stop asking your friends. Stop scrolling for answers. If God gave you the connection, let God confirm the direction. Prayer will give you answers that pressure never will. And if every time you seek Him, He keeps giving you peace about this person, that's not confusion. That's confirmation. We love when God makes things obvious, don't we? A slammed door, a final goodbye, a burning bridge, those are easy to walk away from. But what about the doors He doesn't close? The ones that stay slightly cracked, leaving you wondering, God, is this over or not? Sometimes we mistake silence for absence and waiting for abandonment. But the truth is, not every open door is an invitation to move, and not every closed one is God's doing. There are moments in your life when God doesn't slam the door because He's still doing something inside the room you're ready to leave. And just because you're done doesn't mean God is. That's where faith becomes less about your feelings and more about your obedience. It takes real maturity to stay when walking away would be easier. You're not stuck, you're being stationed by grace. You prayed for direction, you asked for clarity. But what you got instead was a tension that won't release and a door that won't shut. You might be wondering if you misheard God, but what if you're standing exactly where He placed you? See, we've confused resistance with redirection. Sometimes the struggle isn't a no, it's a not yet. You're asking for release, but God is preparing you for revelation. God's not punishing you by keeping that door open. He's preparing you to walk through it with wisdom, not just with willpower. The enemy wants you to confuse discomfort with divine disapproval. But if you'll stop looking for escape routes and start looking for endurance, you'll see what God is forming in your heart right now. That half-open door might be your assignment, not your exit. Don't run from what still has purpose. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stay. Not because it feels good, not because it looks right, but because your spirit refuses to detach from what God still has His hand on. Think about Joseph in prison. Think about David waiting for the throne. Think about Jesus in Gethsemane. They all had open doors they could have walked out of, but staying in God's plan, even when it hurts, is more powerful than escaping in your own strength. When God doesn't close the door, he's saying, I'm not done developing you in this hallway. That thing you're trying to shut out of your life may be the very space where God is refining your character. It's easy to move on when God makes it clean and final. But it takes courage to trust him when he says, stay close. Watch what I do next. Here's what I want you to hear today. God may not be closing that door because he still wants you to see something through it. There are times when he leaves it open not to keep you hanging, but to keep you hoping. That person, that opportunity, that process, it may not be ready for you yet, but neither are you fully ready for it. And if you try to close a door God left open, you risk stepping out of the very grace zone where your next breakthrough is forming. Trust isn't just about moving forward, it's about waiting faithfully. So if the door hasn't slammed, stop trying to force it. Stand there with boldness, pray harder, surrender deeper. Stay open to what God is still writing behind the scenes. Because sometimes the open door isn't a mystery, it's mercy. And God's mercy knows exactly when it's time. We think peace means the absence of chaos. But what if peace isn't found after the storm, but in the middle of it? Sometimes God doesn't calm the waves because he's trying to calm you. When everything is crashing, when people are walking out, when prayers feel unanswered, when your plans fall apart, yet you still feel a strange stillness inside you, that's not denial. That's not numbness, that's God. You're not crazy for having peace while your life looks like it's on fire. It's what Jesus did on the boat. He slept during the storm. Why? Because he carried peace within, not because the sea around him was still. If your peace is only present when everything's perfect, it's not peace, it's control. Real peace shows up in chaos, whispers louder than fear, and sits with you in places your logic can't explain. Chaos doesn't cancel God's presence, it confirms it. The enemy wants you to think that just because your situation is loud, God must be silent. But can I tell you something? God does his best work in the middle of the noise. He didn't wait until the Red Sea was parted to speak to Moses. He told him to lift the staff while the enemy was chasing him. Peace doesn't always look like a spa day or a vacation. Sometimes peace looks like sticking your ground when everything in you wants to run. Sometimes peace means going to sleep even though your problems are still unresolved because your soul knows who holds the solution. You want peace outside, but God is giving you peace inside. And when that peace takes root, it becomes your anchor even when everything around you looks like it's falling apart. You've been asking God to take away the chaos, but what if his plan is to teach you how to carry peace through it? You keep saying, God, change this situation, and he keeps saying, let me change you in it. Peace is not always deliverance, it's development. You don't get stronger when life is easy. You get stronger when you realize the storm didn't break you. It actually built you. That's the kind of peace Jesus promised. My peace I give you, not as the world gives. The world gives peace that depends on performance, but God gives peace that depends on presence. And when you've got the presence of God, you can be in the middle of hell and still lift your hands. You can be in tears and still trust. Peace isn't passive. Peace is powerful. It's the weapon that keeps your faith from falling apart. If you're in a storm right now, if everything feels chaotic, don't let that chaos convince you that God has left the building. He's in your boat. You might not see him moving, but he's there. And if he's in it, you're not going under. Peace is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of a promise. A promise that he'll never leave you, that he's working it for good, that what looks like confusion is still under his control. You don't need the chaos to stop to know he's near you, just need to rest in what he already said. Let peace rise in you. Let it guard your heart and your mind. Let it steady your soul while the waves keep crashing. Because peace in the chaos isn't weakness, it's evidence. It proves that you're not being kept by your own strength, you're being kept by your God. The world tells you if it isn't perfect, it isn't worth it. But God didn't call you to perfect, he called you to process. And process takes growth. Maybe you're looking at your relationship and thinking, this isn't where I thought we'd be by now. But God isn't grading your progress against someone else's highlight reel. He's watching how you handle the growth together. Growth is messy. It's full of hard conversations, awkward transitions, and silent seasons. But if you're both still showing up, still praying, still learning, even if it's clumsy, that's proof of progress. I don't walk away just because it's not ideal. Ask yourself, are we better than we were 6 months ago? Are we learning to love deeper? You don't plant a seed and give up on it in a week. You water it, protect it, and believe in what's coming even when nothing's blooming yet. See, growth doesn't always look like a breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like staying when you used to run, forgiving when you'd rather forget, listening when your pride wants to speak. That's real about spiritual maturity, not grand gestures, but daily courage. You don't grow together by avoiding conflict. You grow by learning to fight for each other, not against each other. Don't confuse friction with failure. Growth has tension. Trees don't stretch without pressure. And if God is growing you through this relationship, it won't always feel good, but it will bear fruit. You may not always like each other, but love isn't proven in the easy times. Love is refined in the ugly, unfiltered, unseen parts of your journey. If you're still willing to grow, still willing to change and be changed, that's not weakness. That's a sign God's still in it. And if He's still in it, it's not done. Don't miss this. God often uses people to prune us, to shape us, to stretch us. You keep asking, why is this so hard? But what if the hardness is the holy ground where God is producing the next level of your character? The person God brought into your life might not be there to make things easy. They might be there to make you ready. Ready for marriage, ready for ministry, ready for maturity. And here's the kicker, they're not the only one growing. You are too. Every late night talk, every misstep followed by grace. Every mutual prayer, it's shaping something stronger than feelings. It's building faith. You don't grow together by being perfect people, you grow by being present people. People who choose to stay rooted even when the winds are strong. Because if you keep growing through it, you might just outgrow the pain that tried to break you. The world celebrates moving on, but God honors pressing in. You may not be where you want to be, but thank God you're not where you used to be. You're learning. You're stretching. You're becoming. And you're not doing it alone. That person may not be your finish line yet, but they're walking the same path of transformation. That matters. That counts. Don't discount the process just because it's painful. God doesn't microwave intimacy. He builds it through time, trials, and truths. Before you walk away and call it with wisdom, ask yourself, are we still growing? Because if the answer is yes, maybe what you're in isn't a mistake, it's a mission. And God always finishes what He starts. Trust the slow bloom. Trust the messy miracle. Because real love isn't found, it's formed. And you might just be in the forming season of something heaven is shaping. Not every relationship is a distraction. Some are divine disruptions. God doesn't just bring people into your life to make you feel better. He brings people to make you grow better. That person might not be your comfort zone, but they are your refining zone. They don't let you settle. They don't let you shrink. They challenge your faith, not by preaching at you, but by pushing you to live what you say you believe. There's a sharpening that happens when God places someone in your life who doesn't flatter your dysfunction, but fuels your destiny. They call out the best in you when you want to revert to the worst of you. Don't mistake friction for failure. Iron doesn't get sharper without resistance. And if their presence is sharpening you, that's not a reason to run, it's a sign to stay. Because destiny is shaped by people who provoke purpose. Sometimes God puts someone in your life who irritates your comfort but ignites your calling. The truth is, what annoys you about them might actually be what activates you. Their presence makes you pray more, reflect more, grow deeper. You don't need someone who mirrors your every move. You need someone who magnifies your mission. And maybe they don't make life easier, but they make your purpose clearer. Pay attention to the ones who don't let you off the hook. The ones who ask, is this really God's best for you? The ones who remind you of who you're called to be when you want to quit. That's not control, that's accountability. That's not conflict, that's growth. Some people won't complete your calling, but they will correct your course. And you'll look back one day and realize if it weren't for them, I wouldn't have stepped into what God had for me. There's a reason you feel more alive when they're around. Not because they're perfect, but because they push you toward your purpose. The right people don't just make you feel something, they make you become something. They speak to your potential, not your past. And every time you think about giving up, their faith in you whispers, don't stop. God's not finished. That's a divine connection. It's not about how many years you've known them. It's about how aligned your spirits are. They don't compete with you. They complete the calling that's been stirring inside of you. And if you've noticed that you're more disciplined, more intentional, more connected to your walk with God since they came into your life, that's not by accident. That's not emotional chemistry, that's spiritual synergy. When your purpose starts growing louder because of their presence, that's a sign from heaven. This is holy ground. Purpose doesn't always come wrapped in peace and perfection. Sometimes it comes through people who challenge your thinking, stretch your spirit, and make you confront your comfort zones. That's how you know it's God. Because God doesn't call you to be comfortable, He calls you to be conformed into the image of His Son. And He often does that through people. So before you label that connection too complicated, ask yourself, are they sharpening my calling? Would I pray more? Dream more? Obey more with them in my life? If the answer is yes, don't walk away from that refinement. Lean into it. Let God use their presence to polish your character and prepare your next season. Because when someone sharpens your purpose, they're not pulling you off course, they're helping you walk it more clearly. And God doesn't waste those kinds of people. He places them on purpose for purpose. There's something in you that just can't walk away, not because you're weak, but because your spirit won't release it. People keep saying, just move on. But what if you're not holding on out of fear? What if you're matting on because of faith? This isn't about emotional attachment, it's about spiritual discernment. Your mind is tired. Your heart feels torn. But your spirit is unsettled, not because you're confused, but because you know deep down God's not finished yet. There's a difference between clinging to the past and recognizing unfinished purpose. Sometimes your spirit knows something your soul can't explain. That unease you feel when trying to walk away, that could be the Holy Spirit saying, stay where I planted you. Don't rush the release. Don't override the whisper of God with the shouts of your circumstances. When God hasn't lifted His hand, neither should you. You've tried to detach. You've prayed to forget. You've asked God to sever the tie, but the tie remains. Why? Because this might not be a soul tie. It might be a spirit-led tether. Sometimes we assume that tension is toxic, but what if the tension is actually truth trying to tether you to God's timing? You can block their number, unfollow their feed, delete the memories, but if God is still working in it, your spirit won't release it. And that's not a burden, it's a sign. God doesn't always release you from what still has refining value. The wrestle isn't with the person, it's with God's process. You're not being held back, you're being held in place for something greater. That inner resistance isn't dysfunction, it's direction. So don't misdiagnose your discernment. If it's not time to let go, your spirit will know it and God will confirm it. Let's be honest, sometimes your spirit won't let go because it sees something your eyes can't yet. It senses that healing is still happening, that growth is still taking root. That purpose is still unfolding. And the world calls that foolishness, but heaven calls it faithfulness. This is the kind of obedience that doesn't always make sense. You look at the facts, conflict, confusion, waiting, and still your spirit whispers, don't move. Not yet. It's not desperation, it's divine awareness. God isn't done shaping them and He's not done shaping you through them. And if you're still burdened to pray, still convicted to hope, still drawn to stand in the gap, that's not your flesh being stubborn. That's your spirit recognizing purpose. You're not just being loyal to a person, you're being loyal to a process that God hasn't told you to leave yet. You're not crazy for still believing. You're not weak for still hoping. You're not stuck, you're spiritually anchored in a place God has yet to release you from. Don't confuse spiritual attachment with emotional indecision. The Spirit of God will give you unrest when you try to process a process prematurely. Your spirit is resisting not because you're confused, but because God hasn't said go. And until He speaks, you stay. That's what obedience looks like, waiting for the voice, not just following the vibe. So if your spirit is resisting letting go, listen, lead in. Don't numb it, don't silence it. It might just be God's way of holding you in position for the breakthrough you can't yet see. Because what your spirit holds onto when led by God isn't a prison. It's a preparation. And when He finally says release, you'll know it's not quitting, it's completion. You thought it was over. You told yourself, this is the last time. I'm done. But then they show up again. Not always physically, sometimes through a memory, a message, a moment of prayer. You can't explain it. You've tried to shut the door, but something keeps opening it again. That's not always a coincidence. Sometimes it's a calling. When God keeps bringing someone back into your life, it may be because there's still something He wants to finish through you or in you. And I get it. You're tired of the cycle. You want closure. But what if God isn't calling you to close the chapter because He's not finished writing the story? God doesn't do random. He does intentional. And if their name keeps stirring in your spirit when you pray, if their presence keeps showing up in your process, don't rush to label it, listen to it. Sometimes it's not about the person, it's about the purpose attached to them. They might not be perfect. They might still be growing. But every time you try to move on, God sends a reminder. And that reminder won't leave you alone. You try to run in one direction, but there they are again in your dreams, in your journal, in a word that seems like it wasn't even meant for you, but hits you right in the spirit. You say, God, why does this keep happening? Maybe because your heart is still in alignment, even if your timeline isn't. God's not into drama, but He is into divine disruption. And if He keeps bringing them back, it could be a sign that this connection isn't done. It's kind of, so don't treat what's recurring as a mistake. Sometimes God repeats the message until you respond in maturity. Don't confuse closure with completion. You wanted closure, but God gave you continuation. That's because He's not trying to make it comfortable. He's trying to make it consecrated. You thought distance would disconnect it. You thought silence would settle it. But when it's God ordained, even space and time can't kill the assignment. Joseph was separated from his brothers for years, yet the connection had purpose. Ruth and Naomi didn't look like they belonged together, but God wove their stories into legacy. God has a way of keeping people in your life who are part of your becoming. And sometimes the only reason they keep coming back is because they're not a detour, they're a destiny marker. So maybe you're not crazy, maybe you're not stuck. Maybe God's just saying, don't give up on what I'm still working on. Because when He brings something back, it's never without reason. If they keep coming back and your spirit isn't settled walking away, stop trying to write the right thing to a story that He did just finish telling. God's not looping them around to test your emotions, He's testing your obedience. Will you seek Him for clarity instead of forcing closure? Will you ask why they're back, not just how they'll fit? God's not interested in replaying pain, He's interested in redeeming it. Sometimes He lets things circle back so you can see them through different eyes that are wiser, more healed, more spiritually aware. It might not be about rekindling romance, it might be about releasing restoration. And you'll never know if you keep slamming the door out of frustration. So next time God brings them back, pause, pray, pay attention. Because if He keeps sending reminders, He's not just bringing a person, He's bringing a purpose back into focus. You've been so focused on what they're not yet that you're missing what God is already doing in them. No, they're not perfect, but if you slow down and look again, you'll see the fruit, not the hype, not the highlight reel. The real fruit, the signs that God is working behind the scenes. They're more humble than they were. They're fighting battles you didn't even know they had. They're praying more, trying harder, listening deeper. And that may not look like a finished product, but it smells like progress. Jesus said, you'll know them by their fruit, not by their title, not by their past, not by your preference. The fruit is how you know they're walking with God. Don't dismiss someone in their developing season. Because if the fruit is showing up, it means the root is changing. And roots grow before results show. We live in a culture that worships instant results, but God doesn't grow people overnight. He grows them through obedience over time. You might not see a transformation every day, but if you look back, you'll see movement. That's what the fruit reveals. They may not quote scripture from the stage, but they're living it behind the scenes. They may not shout in worship, but they're serving in silence. That's fruit. And fruit doesn't grow without pressure, without pruning, without process. Don't overlook what's blooming just because it's not broadcasted. Some of the most powerful evidence of God's work isn't seen, it's felt. It shows up in their patience, in how they handle conflict, in how they respond to correction. That's Holy Spirit growth. And if you can see even a glimpse of that, don't walk away just because it's slow. The presence of fruit is the proof of a faithful God. Here's what the enemy wants you to do. Judge the person by the season they were in when you first met them. He wants you to hold their past against them so tightly that you become blind to the progress in front of you. But God doesn't work in labels, He works in layers. And those layers get peeled back by grace over time. If you've noticed they're not reacting the way they used to, not quitting like they did before, not hiding like they once did, don't ignore that. That's not coincidence. That's character being formed. That's fruit. And when you can trace growth, even in the small things, that's a reason to pause and praise. Because God isn't just doing something in them, He may be using you as part of the watering process. So before you cut them off, ask God if He's still cultivating something through them. If there's fruit, there's faithfulness. If there's growth, there's grace. You don't need perfection to believe in someone. You just need evidence of God's hand. It may not be loud or dramatic. It may not show up in Instagrammable moments, but the fruit is there. It shows up in how they keep going when they feel overlooked, how they say sorry quicker than they used to, how they own their mistakes, not out of shame, but out of spiritual maturity. That's not human willpower, that's God's workmanship. And if you walk away from what God is still shaping, you might miss out on the masterpiece in the making. So check the fruit. And if the fruit is growing, trust that the gardener is working. Because the fruit you see now may just be a preview of the purpose God is about to release. And you don't want to miss that. Stop letting other people's opinions become the compass for your calling. I know they mean well. I know they love you. But their advice is not your assignment. When you're unsure about whether to move on, don't look for peace in pressure, look for peace in prayer. God doesn't speak louder just because more people are talking. Sometimes the loudest voices in your life are the most distracting. But prayer doesn't shout, it reveals. Prayer is where your spirit gets still enough to hear what your emotions have been drowning out. Before you text your friend, call your cousin, or search for another confirmation on social media, go to your knees. You can't hear clearly with everybody in your ear. But if you'll seek God in the secret place, He'll give you the clarity that no conversation can. Because real confirmation doesn't come from pressure, it comes from press. God won't always answer you in the way you expect, but He will answer you in the way you need. And that clarity doesn't come when you panic, it comes when you pause. If you're constantly driven by anxiety, confusion, or frustration, chances are you're listening more to your fears than to your Father. Pressure will always push you into premature decisions, but prayer pulls you back into alignment. That's why the enemy loves to make you feel rushed. Because when you feel rushed, you'll choose what's comfortable instead of what's called. But when you go to God honestly, humbly, and without an agenda, He starts shifting your perspective. Suddenly, the thing that felt cloudy starts to feel clear. The pressure lifts, not because the situation changed, but because you did. And when you change in prayer, you begin to discern the right next step, not just the easy one. Let's be real, sometimes we don't want prayer, we want permission. We don't want God's will. We want His endorsement of our decision, but prayer doesn't work like that. You don't bring your plan to God and ask Him to stamp it. You bring your heart to Him and ask Him to shape it. And if your spirit isn't settled after prayer, that's a red flag, not a green light. God isn't the author of confusion. If you keep leaving prayer more anxious than when you came in, maybe it's time to stop talking to God and start listening for Him. Because confirmation isn't about hearing what you want, it's about receiving what you need to walk in obedience. Don't let pressure push you into decisions that prayer could have delivered you from. God doesn't want to bless your panic. He wants to guide your peace. And peace only comes through seeking, not rushing. Here's the truth. If God brought this person into your life, He is more than capable of giving you clarity about their place in your life. You don't have to beg for signs. You don't need to chase for closure. You need to go to the source. And the more time you spend in prayer, the less validation you'll need from people. Because once God speaks to you, really speaks, every outside voice loses its power. He doesn't confirm through pressure, He confirms through peace. And peace is the kind of clarity that sticks with you in the quiet and holds you in the chaos. So before you rush into a decision based on pain, pause and pray through it with purpose. Let God tell you what no text, no therapist, no friend, and no YouTube video ever could. Because when it's from God, you won't have to force it, you'll just know. Maybe you've been wrestling, questioning, doubting God, should I move on? But what if the fact that you're still wrestling is the clear sign that He's not done yet? When it's not time to walk away, God won't give you peace about leaving, He'll give you strength to stay planted. This isn't about holding on out of fear, it's about trusting God's process even when it's not yet finished. You've seen the fruit. You've heard the whispers. You've prayed. And instead of release, God gave you reminders. Reminders that purpose takes time. That not every story ends in separation. That when God writes a chapter, no one else gets to close the book. So don't make a permanent decision in a temporary storm. If God is still leading, stay in step. Because what He's growing through this connection might just be greater than you ever imagined.
Hey, thanks for stopping by my YouTube channel. I hope you were blessed today. If you were, share this with somebody. Like and subscribe and leave me a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, what we can pray for you about. Hope to see you back here again really soon.